we have the opportunity to rebuild the entire internet on top of Nostr.
The goal is to have the entire podcasting industry adopt Nostr.
Eventually, I'm confident that everything will move over to Nostr.
There's far more use cases than we could conceive of.
You invent something, my shit gets better. I invent something, your shit gets better. That is insane.
The addressable market is basically the whole world.
This is the thing that we're going to use to take down big tech and these centralized institutions. This is it.
Nostr is rising. For those who haven't listened to Bitcoin.review before, I'm NVK. I run CoinKite, where we've been making Bitcoin security products and fund devices since the very early days of Bitcoin. Nostr is a new protocol, and like any new technology, it's very hard for people to understand the why, the what, and the how. We are going to be talking to the people who actually build the things and try to explain to people what and why we're doing this. The show is not sponsored. We are supported by your Zaps and my company CoinKite. You can follow all the Nostr Rising episodes on nostrrising.com. Thank you so much for the support. Hello, and welcome back to the Bitcoin.review Nostr Rising little series, mini-series, little series, short series, I don't know. We'll see. Today with me, I have Miljan. Welcome back.
Hey, everybody. Good to be with you again.
And DK. Hi, DK.
Hey, NVK. I love being another kind of single letter intro person.
Yeah, there is no other way, like who needs vowels as we get into an episode about long form text.
The shortest of short form we can make.
That's right. So Miljan has been with us a few times, so folks know a bit about Primal. Do you want to talk a little bit about your project?
My project. Yeah, I guess I'm generally try to just help various people in the ecosystem and play with all the tools and learn about what's going on in Nostr. I would say I don't have a single project per se, but I guess I do a little bit of haphazard podcasting from time to time and just try to sort of play with all the new tools that are coming out and try to give my opinion. And I've actually been more active in trying to sort of encourage more of the long form writing. So I would love to move away from like Substack and go instead to just to Nostr only. So maybe that's a little bit of context for what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
You should definitely show your podcast, DK. Like your podcast with Max, I think is some of the highest kind of signal content we have on Nostr, even though you don't have a kind of like a regular cadence or anything like that. In the early days of Nostr, this is how I would learn about, what's going on in Nostr and kind of get up to speed with even some of the tech stuff with your interviews and so forth. So everybody should check that out, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called Nostr Talks, and it's sort of people who are building. We've done Max and I sort of get together every once in a while. We do these walking podcasts, but it's really just meant to be kind of what's top of mind for us, what we're excited about in the Nostr ecosystem. But it's like I said, a little haphazard. I think we're going to get a little more serious about kind of a regular cadence with some of the stuff we're doing in podcasting coming up.
That's awesome.
I think it's a really great mix of sort of like what's happening, what's recent, with some galaxy brain stuff that pops up here and there.
Yeah.
So people should check it out.
Psychedelic, trip hop, whatever. Yeah. Whatever the stuff is that Max is talking about.
Okay, so people know the Twitter use case for Nostr now is sort of like very obvious to everyone. And I still remember when I put out the bounty for somebody to create a sort of like a blog / Substack kind of like long form content solution for it. I think the guys from Abla.news were already working on it, or they were just about to launch it. But it's sort of like it coincided, and they got the bounty.
I love how you're trying to take credit for all of this, MVK. Nice, good move, man.
Every single bit. And they did get the bounty. Anyway, so the fascinating for me thing was that trying to release a podcast show notes, right? And also company blogs. It's a challenge, right? Because I don't want to
use a blogging platform because they rug you, right? We had our Substack account locked once. We're a Bitcoin company. I know plenty of people that had their accounts locked before. Fortunately, I had a friend of a friend who knew somebody in there, and they sort of like undid it fast. But like you can't build a house on somebody else's land, right? And on none of these platforms, you don't own the content, and you don't own your identity, and you don't own the linking, right? The URL where you are, and maybe you pay to have your URL, but still not ideal. And Nostr kind of changes all that, right? People saw the short form text on Nostr, and a lot of people don't know that you can publish like full length text, like a massive newsletter on Nostr. And even though Nostr doesn't have editing, we do support versioning. And that allows us to have something that is very similar to what a Substack would be, or, similar to RSS, similar to Blogger. And now I think Axe also has something similar. And now we're sort of like working towards how to find the content, right? Discoverability of the content. Miljan, you're building Primal reads, right? How is that going, and sort of like how does that inform like where we are going?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think Nostr is the ideal protocol for textual speech. That's like a slam dunk for Nostr. I think actually Nostr is excellent for a number of other applications, and we're seeing them pop up, and eventually I'm confident that everything will move over to Nostr. But when it comes to textual speech, it's like so obvious that this protocol is perfect for it. The first kind of most popular type of content that we saw is kind of microblogging, of course, the microblogging clients that you mentioned. And for them, it's not really appropriate to, even though there's no limit really on the note length, it's not really appropriate to go on forever, or even include formatting and things like that, like markdown type of content in there. We discourage that in short form clients, where we essentially don't render. We render it as plain text. And there's been some debate in the early days around whether that's appropriate or not, but I think everyone has converged to the place where we display simple text in microblogging clients. And then there is this massive space that's open for long form content, for blogs, essays, articles, however you want to frame these things, and essentially gives us the opportunity to compete with the likes of Medium and Substack. So at Primal, we definitely want to lean into this whole kind of textual speech paradigm, and supporting reads or long form content as a kind of top level tab, like a major navigation item on Primal, is something that we think is appropriate, and we think we can do a great job right out of the gate. I think we can actually provide a better reading experience and kind of content discovery experience than what Substack and Medium are doing. And when it comes to discoverability, combining long form content with the kind of the short form social media feeds is extremely powerful. Because you could be reading through some blogs or essays or kind of this long form content. You could find a paragraph that you find very interesting. You can highlight it and then choose to post a highlight in very easily with like 2 clicks into your short form feed, and all of your followers will see it right away. So this is something that I think is going to explode on Nostr, and we're quite excited about.
I would agree that I think the text-based, types of formats are the best thing that, Nostr is the best place for that. But I do think there's like a question of who is going to be writing which things when. You mentioned, NVK, you mentioned sort of the company blog use case. That one, I think if you're sort of a Bitcoin or Nostr focused company, it makes sense today. You sort of already understand the pieces and how it comes together. But if we want to attract other people who have writing needs, I think we also need to be thinking about how are these going to fit into the, sort of the current writing processes, or sometimes the businesses that they have. So even though we believe that text is great use case for Nostr, and sort of like long form is going to be great. There's a lot of kind of questions still unanswered about how should text work for these different use cases. How should it adapt to the old world? Should it be all brand new? And those are the things that I'm like, day by day, as I'm like, trying to write long form stuff, both like on Highlighter, or I've played with Habla News and Yakihone. But as I'm playing with, I'm trying to sort of compare those experiences to my experience on using Substack. And there's just like a lot of differences. So I want to try to figure out how to help make these products more adaptable to kind of newer creators who maybe aren't as kind of experienced with the kind of all of the details of how Nostr works. Kind of a little bit more, they create, but they don't necessarily understand all the technology and the trade-offs that we're making.
Yeah, it's a shame that Pablo had a family emergency, so he couldn't join us. He's building highlighter.com, right? That's the front end of a Galaxy Brain, sort of like interoperable system for you to discover and highlight posts that are either long form or short form. What's super interesting that other platforms don't have and won't have is this sort of like immediate social graph and full interoperability of different content types that Nostr does, right? So, for example, if I post a long form content, say I wrote, say banya.lol, I should repost that.
Oh man, absolutely you should.
So I wrote 5,000 words. Yeah, I wrote 5,000 words about doing sauna. Right? And I go through the whole sort of like how to do it, what to do and what not to do. And sort of like, it's one of my obsessions is sauna, right? And wouldn't it be so cool that somebody can just highlight a little piece, right? A quote, right? And just post that. And somehow magically it just shows up on the short form content, right? Well, Nostr really supports that. And it's absolutely insane, right? Yeah. And if somebody comments on the long post, on a post highlight, or on the highlight that is a short post in any client, that content shows up on everything to everyone. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. Yeah. Right. And then, this gets crazier, right? Because what if I want to have, what if I'm launching a product, say a cooler sauna hat, and I can attach a live video feed on, say, Zapstream or Yakihone with my long form content. Mm-hmm. And people can be replying with short form answers, right? While they're watching me, talk about, here's my sauna hat, and wait, there is just one more thing, right? Mm-hmm. I think this sort of like this intertwinedness and the fact that you gain the whole social graph is insane. Now, a good example of the opposite of this is Substack used to get, the great majority of their traffic from Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. And one day Twitter said, no, you don't get to have it because we're going to launch a competing product, right? I think that might be true for Medium as well, right? Didn't they kick out a lot of their links as well? And on Nostr, nobody can kick you out. Right. So you own that identity. You say a relay doesn't like you anymore. That doesn't matter. It can be in other relays. It can be in other clients. So this is super powerful. How do you guys see this evolving?
Yeah, I think we need to come up with almost like a consensus on some way to think about these two things, because like an outside observer, you might see short form and long form as just like text. Like what's the difference really? And long form, of course, is like editable and maybe has some more permanence, or you want it to live somewhere. And short form can be created through highlights or comments within specific pieces of long form text, but then where should those live? And I think to a kind of an uninitiated, if you're not reading the nibs or reading all the details of the differences, you're kind of just like, text is text. Why does it work this way? So I think almost like if there's a way to help us, who care about this, all try to form some view of how to explain this to the world or client developers even, so that we can have like some more better anchors in our minds of how these things may work together and when to use one versus the other, and help that interconnectedness. Like the beauty is the interconnectedness, but then also the challenge is it's so vast. It can kind of remix and interconnect and interlink everything, right? And so back when the web was early, we just had the domains linking to other domains and links. Now we have all these other primitives that could be interlinking among each other.
There was another bounty at the same time. I can't remember who claimed it, but the point was, how do we make it ultra easy for somebody that has a domain, maybe has one button GitHub hosting or whatever, right, to display that Nostr content on that URL?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you still want the until Nostr takes over everything, you still want the friendliness of a URL for content, right?
Yep.
So I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but somebody claimed that as well. So somebody created a very basic JavaScript that sits on a browser. You put I think it was the npub, and boom, shows up. The content just shows up.
I think that was Arthur, maybe from Nostr band. And I think the product is called npub.
npub.pro.
npub.pro. You got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was to compete with Ghost, which is a self-hosted platform for blogging for companies.
Yeah, he's basically taking the open source kind of work from Ghost and making it map so that you can actually host a website from your Nostr on like a domain and stuff. And you can, you get all that mapping. Though I've been encouraging him to consider how can we insert our short form nodes in that too, because Ghost is not designed to deal with the intermix of short form and long form. I think we actually need new designs and new ways to sort of push those designs out. But yeah, it's a great product too.
Miljan, you were...
No, I was just, I mentioned that got reminded of which product it was. And I thought when I looked it up, that it was really well executed. And I'm going to guess that didn't take too long to implement. It just goes to show what you can do on Nostr because the data layer is open. And we're still at the stage of replicating things that already exist, like replicating Twitter, replicating Medium, Substack, Ghost, all these things that we are already familiar with and our users are familiar with. And I think, by the way, it's good that we're still on that track, and it's appropriate to, at least at this early stage, think in terms of recreating things that already exist, especially since we're onboarding users that have been trained on these systems. So they'll recognize right away, they'll know how to use Medium or Substack or so forth. But as DK mentioned, we are dealing with an open protocol with all of these different types of artifacts that exist on public relays. And you can put them together in ways that was not possible before. So we don't see too many examples of like extremely creative kind of, what do you call it, mashups maybe in terms of UX of all of these different types of artifacts, but I'm sure we will see them.
I mean, look at highlighter.com. It does already have a hint of what's possible. Let's put it this way, right? So you have your content there, you have your highlights, you can write content for the highlights, you can use the highlights in the content, you can have lists of highlights, you can share the list of highlights, you can post the list of highlights as posts. It really is like endless, right? I think now we're only bound by our imagination, right? There really is no constraints of what's possible in terms of mashups. Yeah, it's funny because I think we're finally at a point where if you wanted, you could build Google Wave again, open, or Yahoo Pipes,
Yeah, big throwback.
Yeah, I think the challenge is going to be not only to come up with some imaginative way of combining all of these different types of artifacts, but imposing some sort of self-imposed constraints. Because like if you go crazy, the product is unusable. So you sort of need to come up with a different angle that constrains the UX in a way that makes it interesting, streamlined, and usable. So can't wait to see everything that people come up with. But another thought that I had that maybe needs to be emphasized here. Let's say when you look at a product like Medium, and there is a highlight in there, like somebody reads the article and highlights a couple of sentences, that highlight is forever trapped within Medium, right? And that has implications to its usefulness at the end of the day, but also to its visibility globally and so forth. Whereas you can have the same type of UX on Nostr, but once you create that highlight is a Nostr event that is then reusable by any Nostr developer in any way they wish to use.
And the highlight contains some very interesting new information about how a person decided to engage with that and what else they might want to engage with. So I feel like there's all this, basically what could be fed into discovery to help. Like if I highlighted something that you wrote and I also highlighted something NVK wrote, well, somebody who's reading the thing you wrote, they might also want to read the thing NVK wrote, right? So it sort of has that bridging, interlinking signal, but that signal kind of gets lost or it's just sort of haphazardly handled today.
Yeah, there's so much to tap into there.
Yeah. And then you get into gift wrapping and DVMs and stuff, right? So, let's say you want to sell, right, your content. You want a paywall. Some people like paywalls, some people don't like paywalls. So that's a different conversation. The point is, both are valid, both are available, right? And you can create some really clever, cool paywalls around your gift wrap content, right? So you could write long form. You can choose what's inside the gift wrap, what's outside of the gift wrap. You can pipe that straight into DVMs that may translate it for you. Maybe you charge an extra cent for the person who wants it translated. And this is all within Nostr. It's not like you're not calling APIs. Like there's nobody to go and give your phone number and your credit card and none of that stuff. This is all Nostr native, right? We do have an IP now to also convert RSS to Nostr or Nostr to RSS. So you could sort of deliver that way.
Is that currently, are there anybody implementing that?
I don't know. The NIP is open. It seems to be sort of like accepted. So
cool.
I imagine people are.
Good. I've been hoping for that.
I'm looking forward to that because of podcasts. Yeah. I want the podcast to be Nostr first, RSS
100%.
Second. And I want the long form that goes with that RSS event or that podcast release event to have the long form list that we make for the Bitcoin review to be there as long form. And then I want that to be translated, including the transcripts, right? Like
and the transcript, yeah.
It's a lot of content, right? For a 2 hour, I mean, we have a small pod, but like I can just think of like, big important podcasts, right? Like they'll have, they're going to have the transcripts because nowadays it's all machine made. They're going to have, show notes. They're going to have artwork. They're going to have, linking to the guests. Right? They might be splitting their zaps because now we have zaps that you can send a little lightning to people fully integrated into Nostr, right? These things sort of like really come together in a very, like right now, the technologies that we have, they're kind of like fighting each other in a way. Like just because they all been built for the last 20, 30 years, right? And they all sort of like had their own way to become their own. And they're all trying to find like little monopolies, right? Everybody wants to be a monopoly because, that's what Peter Thiel said and how you make money. Mm-hmm. So if we start looking at these things that they no longer can be monopolies, it gets very interesting, right? Because now it's not your choice if the content is owned by the user and distributed in a way that anyone has access to, or the creator allows it to be, right? I think we're trending towards a very interesting direction of design space.
Yeah.
So does the podcast become a transcribed long form content piece in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. It should be like a lot of people don't like listening to podcasts, but they love the content of podcasts. It depends on how you learn or how you absorb content, right? Like I am fully dyslexic, right? So I can't read to save my life. It just takes too long, right? So I just transform everything into audio and I consume in 2x.
Yeah.
so some people are the complete opposite of this, right? Like I go like, oh, did you listen to this podcast? Person responds, I don't listen to podcasts. Send me the transcripts. And then the person does a little search or summary and just sort of like absorbs it that way, right?
And then you can get those things summarized as well, right? That's the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to get all my notes, whether long form or short form, in through like a speech synthesizer, and then I can just listen to them like on a run or something.
Yes. I mean, I do that now with on Apple. If you go into content read or whatever on Safari, right? What do you call it? Reading mode or whatever?
Yeah.
If you go into reading mode and you just go, Siri, please read this to me, you will read.
Yeah.
And you say, please do it in a different accent and a little faster. It really is revolutionary, right? Like, the medium is the message, sure. Like, like it matters how you're delivering the content alters the message for sure. But because the technology is so amazing now on converting back and forth between different mediums, it's no longer a barrier. We're not like blocked by that anymore. It may not be as the artist or as the content creator intended, but like having somebody like read your podcast is 10 times better, 1,000 times better than that person not consume that podcast at all, right? Like, and like we can have now AI go and sort of translate my pod into Swahili. Like somebody can listen to the pod in Swahili. I think it's super cool that these things are becoming fully integrated.
Yeah, you can say like, Siri, summarize the Bitcoin.review 2-hour podcast to me into useful signal information, and then you realize it was only 5 minutes.
I don't think the poor thing would survive that. There's not enough computational capacity. It's just too many commits.
Putting AI agents to sleep.
That's right. Yeah, guys, I think we're like really onto something, and it's palpable.
Yeah,
it really is. I think the UI and the UX are starting to catch up with the design space. I think that was the first sort of like the big hurdle that we had in the last 2.5, 3 years now. It was just not quite there, right? Like, I mean, people come up with stuff and, a person that is not sort of like immersed in Nostr, like that is not living and breathing Nostr, they're not interested in putting up with the little, the early hurdles, right? Like of UX and UI. And I think we're really sort of getting there. I mean, like, now I often cannot tell if I'm on Twitter or Nostr.
Mm-hmm.
Like that says a lot. I really like, I am, oh shit, in which one did I post this one?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Especially if I'm in dark mode on both. Like I really can't tell. And I think that's a win, right? And because we still have to catch up be feature parity with the old stuff. And once we catch up to that, which we're doing now, then we can start adding all this other stuff that they can't do. They literally can't do.
Do you think we're in shape right now to be able to, say, recruit long-form content creators who may not already understand Nostr to be Nostr? Like, are the tools and the sort of UX is good enough now, or sort of what do you think are the gaps?
I think we're just a couple months, 2-3 months from it. I think, how about Muse? It's pretty decent now. Highlighter, it's okay, and it's it's improving fast, right? Like Primal is releasing their reads as well. Text editors are not a hard problem. And releasing the content is not the hard problem. The hard thing is how do you display that stuff, how you search that stuff, how you reply to that stuff, and that's going to accelerate much faster once there is more people using. But I think we're kind of there.
Because I think like long form content creators who don't otherwise care about Nostr as primary as we do are probably mostly looking for, is this going to help me grow or help me monetize better? And I think we could do a lot to help people grow more. So when they show up, we actually can get them connected. I think that's one of the things the centralized platforms do really well is they figure out how to find kind of audience cross-pollination and if you sign up for this newsletter, you might also subscribe to these 2 or 3 other ones. And that actually helps keep people as new creators excited about the platform because they watch their number growing up, right?
The creators love to hack the algos as well. It's part of it's like those YouTuber guys or, I'm sure Substack is the same. There's a lot of creators that the whole point, the reason why they like the algos is because they game the algo and now they're on the top all the time. Mm-hmm. It's like Odell with the trending,
mm-hmm.
His all caps. Miljan, you were saying.
Yeah, so I think in terms of UX, we, at least at Primal, we wanted to emphasize the content consumption UX and really nail that for long form content and kind of the integration of short and long form textual content. And I think we're pretty much there with the upcoming 2.0 release. We're kind of currently in the final stages of testing that, so that's going to come out soon. And I think once the consumption UX is there, that will spark the imagination of at least some content creators who will want their content to be displayed in that kind of nice UX. I feel that some of them would be willing to jump through a few hoops to get their content out there, especially those who are already interested in the audience that exists on Nostr, so like Bitcoin related and kind of freedom related crowd. But then the next stage after that is to really level up the content creators UX, so it's at least on par with the competing platforms. And I think there's more work to be done there. I know Pablo is focusing on that quite a bit with Highlighter, and I'm confident he'll be able to pull it off. We'll have some kind of basic capabilities on Primal as well. But when it comes to the pitch to creators, we'll soon have this unique way of publishing content there, of consuming kind of this open content. Once you publish it, it kind of appears on many different clients, in many different apps, with easy discovery. And really you get to, not build your house on someone else's land, like you said earlier, NVK. You get to actually build your audience and kind of have sovereignty over that forever. That's a unique kind of proposition that no other closed platform can do. And even the quasi-open platforms, I think, are going to have a tough time making as convincing of an argument around that as Nostr is. And then beyond that, the ability to monetize your content directly with the users is also quite unique to Nostr. Like when it comes to the split, the revenue split, how about 100%?
Yeah.
And then you, as the content creator, decide how you're going to split it with collaborators or even the Nostr applications that were able to produce that subscription and so forth. I think is an interesting pitch to creators that many will be receptive to.
Do you have ideas from the Primal Read side? Because you're going to be focusing on this consumption, do you have ideas on how you think content creators should be paid? Like, should they focus on value for value per article, or do you think of like paywalls and subscriptions are likely? Because I think when you build a great experience around that consumption, it actually sort of gives you the ability to also sort of guide the ecosystem in some ways.
So Pablo created this spec for content subscriptions while working on Highlighter, but of course, Highlighter is an actual Nostr client. So when you create a subscription tier on Highlighter, you're not creating a Highlighter subscription, you're creating a Nostr subscription. So basically, this publishes this event to the Nostr network saying, this is the paid tier. These are the details. It specifies the pricing and kind of internally the relays where the content will go to. And you can set things like, whether this content becomes unlocked after a certain amount of time, which in my opinion is probably going to be the most effective way to kind of implement these paywalls. Because as Gigi likes to say, and I agree, digital content wants to be free. And it will be free regardless of how we go about it. But if there is a bit of extra kind of convenience to kind of get that content sooner by a day or a week or something like that, wrapped in a nice UX, if I want to support a certain creator, if I want earlier access to their content, I'm likely to subscribe to that. So I can see those types of paid subscriptions working really well for content creators. And from Primal's point of view, we'll definitely make sure that the UX around that is impeccable.
Yeah. So I'm of two minds with this, So first of all, it's always the absolute tiny minority that subscribes to content, right? When you look at how many people subscribe to somebody's Substack versus how many people end up reading that content, it's not even close, right? Now the question is, given a substantially better UX, right, more integrated things, there is a high chance that just the zaps alone might actually completely overcome the amount of money that somebody makes in subscriptions. I don't believe in Bitcoin subscriptions. The reason why most people subscribe more than once for anything on the internet is because they forget to cancel it. So it just keeps on dinging their credit cards. People with Bitcoin don't forget, and also it's designed so that, you have to act. It's not pull, it's push, right? So you have to actively go and try to take it out. I mean, I'm sure platforms will figure out ways of creating sort of like wallets and things so you can do pull, and, we'll find a way. But I think things are about to be shaken greatly. And, aside from like mid-size, small content creators, I imagine the majority of the people don't make money from the subscription on their Substacks. They make their money becoming famous on Substack and going to talk, right? So they're paid to travel to a conference to give a talk, or, it's the same with books, right? Like most people don't make money from their books.
Right.
It's just the books open them doors to speaking engagements and being, advisors and, all that stuff. On Patreon, on the other hand, there are people who do make a living having closed communities, right? So, for example, Jack Krause, right? I call him the UV doctor. So he has a decent following there, and all the content that he produces is closed off, right? It's in there. I think we're fortunate that, he's fortunate that like he maybe has a user base that respects his content, doesn't just dump it on torrent. But I think that's not going to be true for most people in there, right? So I think there is it's just the ticking time for people trying to paywall their content. Information wants to be free is very difficult to get around that. People will definitely have licensing on their content, and of course people can't remonetize it that easy, right? But I really I think when somebody's providing like a substantial amount of value, right? I'm not talking about like giving a beer because somebody said something funny on Nostr Twitter. Let's put it this way. I'm talking about like, somebody wrote, 5,000 words about sauna, and somehow that article, really made them do the sauna. They might buy me a beer.
Those people need to get rewarded. That's for sure.
Right? You might get a beer. And you know what? Like a beer is more than what people pay for subscription and all these things. Right? So instead of being $2, maybe it's $5. And that does add up.
Could be many beers. And
exactly
what we have going for us on Nostr, and we almost forget it too often. We have zaps and we have top zaps. And imagine all those articles having permanent kind of open auction to be the top zap on that article. Like legendary articles like banya.lol and many other ones.
It's right on par with Wade Dye's B-Money, right? Like
seminal piece of work.
Think about all those things existing forever on Nostr, and there being a forever auction for the top zap on each piece of content. That's new. That hasn't been, we haven't seen that before.
And now imagine all the other stuff, right, that we haven't thought about, right? Like maybe when somebody shares a quote of that article and somebody gets zapped for that, maybe a cut goes back to the creator, right? Like there's this like, one thing that most interests me, like was I kind of learned on my own about like long tail, okay, and creating a fatter long tail. Right. This is why we produce like a lot of accessories and do a lot of things on one of our businesses. Right. Is because, see, like a person finds value in one of the things that you make. Right. And then if you make a lot of things, you're always going to have this long tail, right, that diminishes but is long. And as you keep on layering more things, this long tail becomes thicker and thicker and thicker. Right. So because information is permanent on Nostr, I mean, sure, it's ephemeral in a certain way, but it can be made permanent. The thickness of the long tail can scale much faster versus the actual initial value than in any other platform, right? Because you are aggregating the social graph, you're aggregating the other modes, you're aggregating everything else. If you're talented enough, you might find a way where this long tail starts to become like just a single flat line. right? It's totally within the helm of reason, right? When you look at podcasts and like how people listen to podcasts, all these things work in long tail.
Mm-hmm.
All content that's evergreen works in long tail. So I really think that like we can optimize UX, UI to take advantage of that so that people keep on making a tiny little bit like licensing of patents or whatever, right? Like keep on making a little bit off of that content forever, right? I think there is like a huge opportunity there for that lower lift part of the sales cycle.
Yeah, effectively, once you've established trust, it's the hardest thing to establish and the most valuable thing, right? So once you have that trust established from some piece of work you've done, then you can sort of keep increasing and layering in those services like you're saying. But I think you can also use that trust that you've established to share trust with other new up-and-comers. And we don't really have a system for how that could be systematized within Nostr. Like even on the internet, maybe it's a retweet or something, but we don't really have good economic systems that help sort of encourage those, the growth of everybody else. If you have a lot of trust and then you have like risen your long tail to be almost like flat, now you can actually start sharing that around and helping grow others that you also think are good and deserve some of the trust. So it's sort of cascade and draft off of.
That reminds me of how like, a bit is a bit of a shady industry, but it's interesting nonetheless. How like the rap industry with like albums.
Oh yeah.
They used to happen way back, like for different categories of music, but like rap and hip hop really took this to a new level, which was you have a new artist with a featured established artist, right? So be like, I don't know, like some guy who's new, and then, Jay-Z would be featured in his album, right? And that would help drive the sales. And they have their whole Hollywood accounting way of resolving some of that. But even if the artist, it's a bit taken advantage of or whatever, like there's still, or not, depending on the deal, who knows, right? But the point is, he got now an audience.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even if he didn't make a cent on that specific album, right?
Yeah.
Now he has a name, an audience, and he can start establishing himself and sort of like developing that channel, right? Which was not possible before. With Blogger, remember blog rolls?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Twitter was a bit of that, right? Like it was a migration of a way of sharing the people that, like are related to you. So on blog rolls, you had on the side there, you'd go and you list a few people who are who you like, essentially. And the people who visit your site sees that list, right, that you curated. Nostr can create this in a million different ways. So, in long form content, I mean, maybe me as the writer, I curate a list of related topics. And, of course, we would make this incredibly insane with like integration and algos and UX. But the point is, these other people are related there. Maybe they're related right on the content itself. When you're mentioning something, you highlight over it and boom, it shows you 10 other people talking about that specific type of quote or whatever. And maybe links every single other article that quoted that article, right? Things get super cool.
Yeah.
And you now start to discover things in a non-shady way, right? Like it's actually organic, related to the content. It's not like you're trying to prop up something.
Well, in a sense, it's like the people that are doing it, right? Like it's a person-to-person thing where you talk about like Jay-Z and, what he's doing is he's like giving a shout out. And that's something that doesn't necessarily flow directly through the publisher of the music or the rights holders, right? Like there might be some sort of Hollywood accounting I don't know about, but I think like whenever there's any of that cross-pollination, but it's person-to-person cross-pollination, right? I mean, it's effectively, we're here and you said, go shout out your podcast. So people trust you, NPK, then you have me shout out my podcast. Now more people may hear about my podcast. That same kind of interplay is happening person-to-person instead of through Substack or through Twitter or through some other service that's kind of doing the mixing. I still think, though, that all of that signal today is kind of lost or slowed down because a lot of the development in Nostr is focused on like a UX or a feature. And a lot of it kind of avoids the sort of the evil algorithms or the recommendation of the perceived evil algorithms. I think actually algorithms can be done really well in an open way.
Yeah, I think it's because, I think it was Jack who said this, we're still running away.
Yeah.
From the old, right? Like we're very jaded.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's changed quite a bit. I think people are sort of warming up to the idea of algos, and algos are great as long as you have choice, and ideally they're open, right? Like, I mean, it's just please don't lie to me. Like, I think like Nostr really is just please don't lie to me, right? Like technology. Yeah. So I think as these things start to become clear, users will trust the platforms. They will trust, and when I mean platforms, I'm talking about clients or relays, not actual. They'll start trusting the tools. Right? There's nothing worse for an artist or for like a scientist or whatever than not being able to trust its tools. Yeah. Right. Like it's an awful thing. It really is. As we trust the tools, we can build better and build with confidence, right? I mean, we're not building anything more than webs of trust, right? I mean, we're just going back to that model, but in a much more scalable and more directional way, right? Like you can choose what you want to achieve in each direction and sort of like let the technology just take you there, right?
And by being open, then they can be switched, right? So like if I don't like the way this one's behaving, I can go switch in one that is behaving the way I want, or I can try something new.
You can flip
to something else. Yeah. I think that is the critical thing. It's effectively a mirror of what we see in relays, right? Relays put data stores in competition with each other. So they all are on their best behavior. Because if you don't want to relay my stuff, fine, but like 15 other people do, right? And effectively, that's what makes the ecosystem work. I think we haven't seen yet how that works in the algorithms world.
Oh, we're going to see that very soon, I think, we're starting to see that. I don't know if you know, DK, but we already have like an algorithm marketplace.
Is this the DVM stuff? I played with the Amethyst DVMs, or is there?
Exactly, you've seen them on Amethyst. So they also exist on Nostr. But yeah, we're going to lean into that from Primal as well, where we are making it very easy to discover these algorithms, as well as manage a large number of algorithm kind of based feeds within the client, all of our clients. So that's one thing. And the other thing is we're building a bunch of new algorithms, which we're going to expose there, like publish for other clients to use. So one algorithm is potentially dangerous. Multitude of algorithms that you can pick from is probably what freedom looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
And they all compete for you. The relays compete for you, client applications compete for you, algorithms compete for you. So let's see what happens.
So is there a simple way that I could just plug an algorithm in? Like I can write up like maybe a few lines of code to say, I don't know, show me all of the notes that Miljan has liked today.
Yep.
And then I can just like create that algorithm. How do I do that today?
So you would write a DVM, and the only thing you need to expose is the list of event IDs. That's it. Just give me the event IDs. If I'm the client, I'll know what to do with it. So yes, you need to be a developer to do that today, but very soon we're going to make that easy for end users to do as well. And you mentioned curations earlier, NVK. I think curations are going to be massive, where this already exists in some shape on Highlighter, so people should check it out. But you can create any number of curations, and you can add articles and notes to each individual curation. So it would be nice if then you can create a feed by combining one or more curations. And then you have an algorithm that's not powered by a machine, but it's powered by humans that you've selected there.
Yeah.
So this is for sure going to blossom on Nostr.
To know when I think like one milestone to me is when we start seeing ads that are not horrible. Because, like ads work. Like, I mean, like we can all dream about a world without ads. I hate ads. But the reality is like when ads are done in an ethical way, right? And there is competition for clients, there's competitions for feeds, there's competitions for everything. It's no longer a trap, right? Because right now ads are a trap. They make the platforms, they make the algos become these horrible sewers, right? Like Twitter's a sewer right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's awful because of how the ads most convert. Once we start moving to a better place, we're going to see ethical ways of delivering some ads. We're going to see, and that may be how some of these algos feeds, they monetize, right? And the users might be okay with it because now they're saving money, they're getting something for it. Everybody's happy, right? As these things evolve, we're going to see some of the old, we're going to see some things that are much, much more new, and we're going to see the intertwine of things. It's a lot less black and white, which is a great thing. right? It's a lot more choice. And I think we're really going on that direction. Guys, we're close to the hour mark here. What are some of your final thoughts in regards to how hopeful you are, where we're going, and the challenges you see regarding this topic, the long form content? DK.
Yeah. Well, like I said at the top, I still feel like the main thing that I'm excited about is how do we get these long form tools to be at least at parity, and then explain the difference between a long form and a short form. Because I think right now we have, so much interconnectedness and so much possibility that we sort of, I think, need to simplify some of the experiences and messages of what a client is and what it accomplishes and sort of how the interconnectedness works. And I think if we can do that, I think a whole new type of creator will come here wanting to write and keep their thinking and writing permanent here and sort of build audiences where they control the audience.
Miljan, final thoughts on this?
All right. So we talk often about the global town square, and I think this will be powered by Nostr. No, there's no question in my mind about that. And I think long form content will be an important part of it. Whereas, Twitter emerged as the legacy, let's say, global town square. And there was really no room for nuance. Everything had to kind of be fit in kind of quick, short notes, and there was no attention span. I think by integrating these kind of micro blogging feeds with long form content in a meaningful manner, I think we'll not only get a better town square from the point of view of the ability to speak and censorship resistance and so forth, but also the ability to introduce nuance into the public discourse. So I'm super excited about that. I'm convinced that it's going to happen. I'm also convinced that we'll discover new monetization methods, both for application and kind of relay creators, as well as content creators themselves. If there is a lesson we can learn from torrents, is that, people were downloading stuff for free or quote unquote stealing it. But the moment that a better UX showed up with, let's say, Spotify, almost everybody moved over to Spotify. So people weren't really after, they weren't trying to steal anything. They just wanted better UX. They didn't want to have to burn CDs and put pieces of plastic into whatever their stereos and so forth. So I'm convinced that through the inevitable experimentation that we're going to see on Nostr when it comes to monetizing content, we're actually going to crack that as well. So I think we're going to have everything in closing. We're going to have the best apps and we're going to have the best content. And that's why people are going to come to Nostr in the long run.
I think we're going to have to leave with that as the final words. Guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Love it. Yeah, thanks for having us.
I hope that this mini-series help people see the light or find full derangement and then come later. In Bitcoin, we have this saying, you buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve. On Nostr, you're going to get your identity at the time you deserve. So, it's happening.
Love it.
Nostr is rising. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more resources, check the show notes. We put a lot of effort into them. And remember, we don't have a crystal ball, so let us know about your project. Visit bitcoin.review to find out how to get in touch.